Hello everyone. So guys, advanced structure series is going on. This is episode 2 and today I'm going to teach you an advanced structure which is affinity with. Affinity with. Okay. What does it mean? Affinity with means if you have an affinity with someone or something, you feel that you are similar to them or that you know and understand them very well. I mean to say, if you say that I have an affinity with my dog, it means I have liking for my dog. Means there is something, there is a bonding, there is an attraction. So if you have an attraction for someone, if you have that bonding for someone, if you have that liking for someone, it means you have an affinity. Affinity with that person, that place, that thing. That could be anything, any noun. You have an affinity with that noun. Correct, guys? So you can say affinity with, you can also say affinity for. But if you're writing an exam, then you have to think of it. You have to mostly use with, affinity with. In spoken English, sometimes we use affinity for as well. So a natural liking or attraction for someone or something. So if you have that attraction for someone or something, it means you have that affinity. Okay. If I talk about the synonyms, this is attraction. Affinity means attraction, liking, leaning, sympathy. You're getting drawn towards something. Getting drawn means you're just getting drawn. That is affinity. Let's talk about the structure. The structure is like subject. In present you have to use have, has, like I have an affinity, she has an affinity. Okay. In past you can say had, like I had an affinity, they had an affinity. So after this you can use with or for, mostly with, and then the object. I mean, I have an affinity with this room, I have an affinity with this laptop, like this. I have an affinity with that dog, like this. You can also use it like there is or there was an affinity between dash and dash, like affinity between Ram and Sham, affinity between that person and that girl, affinity. Okay, let's see some examples, guys. I have an affinity with village. So affinity with village means I have that liking for the village, I have that attraction to the village, I always get drawn towards village. So I have an affinity with village, or you can also say I have an affinity for village. Okay, both the prepositions are allowed here. Growing up in a political family, it comes as no surprise that he has a natural affinity for work that involves leadership and decision making. It means there is a person and he has grown up in a political family. So it comes as no surprise. It means there is no surprise that he has a natural affinity. Natural affinity means natural attraction, natural liking for work that involves leadership and decision making, because he has been in a political family. So he has an affinity for that leadership kind of work. If I say that I have an affinity with acting. Okay, it means I have observed the people. I know so much about acting. I always watch movies, so I have that affinity with acting, or I have an affinity for acting. Both are allowed. Okay, since he has grown up in this city, he is likely to have an affinity for it, no matter how far and wide he travels. It means there is a guy and that guy has grown up in this city, so it's likely, it's obvious, it's evident that that person has an affinity for this city, no matter how far and wide he travels. If he is in this city, doesn't matter whether he travels for 5 kilometers or 20 kilometers, he has that liking, that attraction for this city, he has that affinity. Okay, next. The affinity between them is gradually growing. So you can also use affinity between dash and dash. So affinity means attraction, between them is gradually growing. That affinity is growing. It means that attraction is growing, that liking is growing between two people. Next. The teacher sensed a growing affinity between the two of her brightest students. It means there is a teacher, and teacher sensed means teacher observed that there is an affinity which is growing between two of her brightest students. There are two students of the teacher and there is an affinity between these two students. Okay. and the teacher hoped that they would get together someday. So there is an affinity. So the teacher is expecting or thinking that one day in future they would get together, they would come close, since they have an affinity between each other. Okay. He has an affinity with all sorts of artists and creative people. So there is a guy and he has an affinity with all sorts of artists. Any type of artist is there, any type of creative person is there. He has that liking for those people. He has that attraction for those people. It's not wrong to have an affinity for people who belong to your hometown. If you come to know that there is a person from your village, from your hometown here, where you live these days, so you will definitely have an affinity with that person. You will have a liking, an attraction for that person. So got it, guys? So this is what affinity with is. If you want, you can take the screenshot of it. Okay, here we go. Take the screenshot, guys. Okay, so see you in another episode. Till then, take care, keep practicing, and have fun. Thank you, guys.